fun. Yeah.
Hey, Russell. Thank you, Chairman. We're going to get 100.
Testing. A little bit higher. Testing. Check, check, check. All right. Aloha, everybody. Aloha. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm going to just talk about what we're going to be talking about today and kind of the agenda. So I'm going to give you the presentation in pieces. It's loaded with information. So we're going to take it step by step. And there's going to be a period for questions in between. And I want to keep the questions relevant to what I covered. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions about the whole thing. Anything that you want to talk about, we can talk about afterwards. So my name is Jen Ruggles. I represent Puna, Upper Puna, and some of Kalapana. And I'm concerned about war crimes as a legislator in Hawaii. And I want to tell you why and what I'm doing about it. So just to give you some background, I was born here. I was born and raised here. I've lived here my entire life. I went to Mountain View Elementary. I went to Keanu High. And I grew up being taught and believing that Hawaii was the 50th state. We were that 50th star on the flag. And this is what I thought when I ran for office as well. But since I have been in office, I was invited to a conference. I've been invited to plenty of conferences that are pertinent with my duties as a council member. And this conference had to do with the history of Hawaii. And it hosted Hawaii's top scholars and experts in Hawaii's history, legal status. And it was to talk about the history of Hawaii, the Hawaiian kingdom, its politics, what the lifestyle was, and the legalities of Hawaii's history, how Hawaii became a state, and all of that. So I attended, I watched the presentations. There was Dr. Donovan Preza, Dr. Ron Williams, Dr. Keanu, and out of all of the presentations that I watched, one presentation struck me the most, and it was one about the legality of Hawaii and Hawaii's legal status and how it's really remained the same for hundreds of years. And that presentation was by Dr. Keanu, and he's here today to help answer any questions that we have. So when I saw his presentation, I was actually really confused. It was loaded, and I introduced myself to him as a council member. He recommended that I read an article that he wrote titled "The Ongoing Illegal State of War Between the United States and the Hawaiian Kingdom Since 1893. And this was a very thick paper. It took me a long time to get through. It was 20 minutes per page. Oh yeah, before we move on any further, can somebody try to dim the lights a little bit? I want to make sure you guys are able to see the PowerPoint. Thank you. So as I read this paper, it took me 20 minutes per page. I was looking up the legal terms, history, the sources, going, is this real? And I had a lot of questions. So I requested a meeting from the author, Dr. Sai, and he kindly accommodated my request. He answered all of my questions, including the ones about his reputation. He's been more honest and transparent with me than my own county attorney, and we will get to that. So now I would like to share with you how I got here and what I'm doing about it. So in the process of me reading this paper, I received an email from the Acting Council of Regency from the Hawaiian Kingdom. And this email informed us of several things, and they were all legal actions. And within this email, one of the most notable was this memo. It's from the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, authored by Dr. Alfred Desayas. The United States sat on this Human Rights Council when Dr. Desayas was elected. Dr. Desayas is actually a United States citizen. He graduated from Harvard. He's an attorney, he's a historian, and he's one of the world's leading experts in human rights and international law. And this is what he wrote. I have come to understand that the lawful political status of the Hawaiian Islands is that of a sovereign nation-state in continuity. So what does that mean? A sovereign nation-state in continuity. That means a country. That means a country like Canada or the United States. So there's Canada and the United States, and there's the Hawaiian Kingdom. On the same plane, they have the same rights and obligations in the international realm. He goes on to state, and no, this is written February this year, he issued this, that it is under a strange form of occupation by the United States, resulting from an illegal military occupation and fraudulent annexation. Illegal occupation. What do we think of when we think of occupation? We think of war. We think of Syria and Iraq. Maybe that's why he says it's a strange form of occupation. And then fraudulent annexation. I think we all know what fraud means. And annexation, I'm going to get into that a little bit more later. He goes on to state, as such, international laws, the Hague and Geneva Conventions require that governance and legal matters within the occupied territory of the Hawaiian Islands must be administered by the application of the laws of the occupied state, in this case the Hawaiian Kingdom, not the domestic laws of the occupier, the United States. So what does this mean? This means that we should be following the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom, not the United States. So this is pretty heavy hitting. So I sought to verify the claims that Dr. Desayas had made, and that the Hawaiian Kingdom still existed. And one of the things that I learned is that in international law, there's a difference between a state and its government. So while its government can be overthrown, the state continues to exist. So if, say tomorrow, if Canada was invaded and its government was taken over, Canada as a country would still exist. Its government wouldn't. And that's very similar to what's happening here. And so the substantiation of the existence of the Hawaiian Kingdom is found in many cases. And in fact, the US itself has acknowledged the existence of the Hawaiian Kingdom in several cases. But one of the most recent was this case at the Permanent Court of Arbitration titled Lance Larson versus Hawaiian Kingdom. The Permanent Court of Arbitration is an international court. When this case was first forwarded to them, they initially thought that they couldn't accept it because they thought, well, Hawaii is the 50th state of the United States. This is a domestic issue. This is not an international issue. This needs to be handled within the courts of the United States. We don't have authority over this. But after exchanges between the United States and the parties, they determined that they did in fact have authority. I'm going to zoom in on that highlighted bottom part now. And they accepted the case as a dispute between a private party and a state. In international terms, a state means a country or a nation, an independent sovereign entity. This was in year 2000, in December. And this is precisely what the United Nations experts said, that the Hawaiian Kingdom still exists as a sovereign state in continuity. So the details of this case and the status of it, if you have any questions on that, we can go over that afterwards. The lead agent that represented the Hawaiian Kingdom at The Hague in the Netherlands is here, Dr. Keanu, so we can talk about any of the details and the status of this case after, if you'd like. And now I just want to share with you some notable tidbits about the Hawaiian Kingdom that I learned through my process of researching. The Hawaiian Kingdom actually had 20 treaties with countries, and these countries included France, Italy, Russia, and even the United States. It was a neutral state. It was a part of the family of nations. It was the second most literate in the world. It was a constitutional monarchy. It had civil rights. It had made slavery illegal while the United States was still buying and selling slaves. In fact, there were several cases where slaves had escaped from the United States to be free in the Hawaiian Kingdom, and one of these cases is documented where one of these slaves set up a hotel at Waikiki now that he was freed. And the Hawaiian Kingdom actually had electricity before the White House. So what happened? On January 16, 1893, 160 U.S. Marine troops landed in Honolulu with the intent of overthrowing the government, which they did the next day. So what does this mean? Well, in customary international law, there's two states that a country can be in, two states of affairs that a country can be in: a state of war or a state of peace. And at the time President Grover Cleveland was president, he conducted a presidential investigation, and 2 months later he made an address to Congress, and this is what he said: "The military demonstration upon the soil of Honolulu was in itself an act of war. An act of war committed by the United States without the authority of Congress, but the government of a friendly and confiding people had been overthrown, and a substantial wrong had been done." So what does it mean to be in a state of war? It means that the laws of war apply. And it means that the state of war can only cease to exist after two things: either the occupant completely withdraws, or a treaty of peace is reached that transfers the sovereignty of the occupied state to the occupier. So this is very similar, the state that Hawaii is in, to what happened when Germany invaded Luxembourg in 1940. There was no resistance, yet it was still considered to be a state of war between Germany and Luxembourg. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Are there any questions about just what we covered here? Go ahead.
You stated that you did not know about this until 2018. Did you not have this in 7th grade? It's required by Hawaii state education standards. Is that what you're telling? Remember, you are under, having stated when you came here by election, in debate, you believe in honest, transparent, and accountable, accessible government. I did ask you for the letter prior to, you said I had to come here. You specifically addressed me in that.
Okay, thank you for your question, ma'am. Let me answer the first one. The first question: did I know about this, or was I taught this in 7th grade?
No.
If I was, I don't remember.
It was part of the Hawaii state standards. You are an honor roll.
I went to KL High.
They still teach lies.
Did you go? You did not know about the sovereignty movement at UH. I went to UH at the same time you were there.
So-
You did not know about the sovereignty movement.
Yeah, but let me answer your
It's all
question.
about sovereignty.
You are correct. I knew about the sovereignty movement, and I had heard about this movement of this concept of Hawaii. Please let me finish, ma'am. You're going to interrupt me. I'm not going to call on you anymore. So I heard about this concept of Hawaii being occupied, but I didn't understand it. I didn't put it together until I took the time to educate myself as a decision maker on the Hawaii County Council.
Just to reiterate what you said in the beginning is you did not know about it until.
I did not know about the state of war or the illegal occupation. I didn't understand it like I did
It
now.
was covered in the
Well, thank you for the reminder.
Thank you, Jen.
I'm sorry I don't remember in 7th grade.
Never was taught in the 7th grade.
Are there any other questions?
You stated that there were certain ways that the belligerent occupied country like Hawaii, Hawaiian Kingdom is, and you listed certain ways that they could get their country back. So one thing we did learn at UH is...
Now, is this a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you knew about the option of a telegram. We learned this at UH International Law class, that we would have, once we send the telegram, the person is standing. Once they send the telegram, then we would have 2 years to fill all the vacancies, which would come out of Committee of the Third statutes. Have you ever heard of that? Because that is an option.
No, this is just the basics of international customary law that I studied.
Okay,
Thank you. Abraham?
I'm sorry.
I was at the council meeting
I can repeat your question.
when the question came up for the first time. And from what went on that day, and you were questioning Joseph and you actually, I think you really put it in the spot, but that doesn't matter. You wanted your question answered. But the way I was confused, I didn't know whether you believe in the state of Hawaii or the kingdom of Hawaii, for example, within the United States, or that you really believe that this is something that's bygone, it is the United States, and there shouldn't be a kingdom.
Okay.
So really this question.
Okay, so your question is whether or not I believe in the state of Hawaii existing?
Yes, now I know that you do.
Okay,
Correct?
so the rest of the presentation will answer that. But that's, I mean, that was within the letter that I sent Joe asking for clarification on. All right, let's move on. So Hawaii is in a state of war. Now let's talk about occupation. On January 17th, Queen Liliuokalani wrote a letter to protest to the United States. And she did this as to prevent bloodshed. She says, "I yield my authority until the United States reinstates me as the constitutional sovereign of the Hawaiian Islands." She uses the word yield. Yield means to temporarily give way to under pressure. It does not mean cede. And this is very important. This is going to come up later. So when the Queen yielded her authority to the United States, the Hawaiian Islands was placed under an authority of a hostile army. And according to the Hague Conventions, that's the definition of being occupied. So between November 13th and December 18th, the Queen was in negotiations with the United States to return the state of affairs back to a state of peace. And they did actually reach an agreement. And that agreement was within a treaty of peace, and it was that the Queen would grant amnesty or promise not to prosecute the insurgents if the United States returned the government back to the Hawaiian Kingdom. The United States restored the Hawaiian Kingdom government. The United States has yet to fulfill its terms of the agreement. So back to the story. A few months after that agreement, on July 4th, 1894, the insurgency named themselves the Republic of Hawaii. And in 1900, U.S. Congress renamed the Republic to a territory. They took over the Department of Education and began this program for patriotic exercises in public schools. And they began the process of denationalization. How many of you have heard of denationalization? This blew me away. I had not heard of denationalization. So they began a policy of punishing and hitting any children that spoke the Hawaiian language. Keep in mind that the Hawaiian language is the national language of the country. This would be similar to going to France and then beating the children who spoke French in France, or Japanese in Japan. If that were to happen to us, I don't think we'd be very happy about it. They began to observe American holidays and teach American history. This was published in the Harper's Weekly And the subtitle reads, "This drill is constantly held as a means of inculcating patriotism into the hearts of children." How many of you know what inculcate means? Because I didn't. Inculcate means to fix a belief in one's mind by repetition, also known as brainwashing. So the children at school were constantly required, I don't know if you can see in the picture, but they're doing this. And they had to say, "We give our heads and our hearts to one country, and our country, we give our heads and our hearts to God and our country, one language, one flag." This is denationalization. So now let's talk about what the UN human rights expert referred to as the fraudulent annexation. So the US claims in 1998 to have annexed the Hawaiian Islands. But before we talk about annexation, we have to talk about cession. This is customary international law. It says the only form in which cession can be effected is in an agreement embodying in a treaty between the ceding and the acquiring country. So annexation is the result of cession. One country cedes their sovereignty through a treaty of peace, and then the receiving country accepts it. The country is then, therefore, annexed. So again, annexation is the outcome of cession. Cession is the outcome of a treaty. The Geneva Convention and customary international law only recognizes annexation as an outcome of the treaty of a treaty of peace. And under US law, the only way to acquire a territory is by a treaty of peace, and that is how the United States acquired Alaska and all of the other states. Those were all treaties. So in 1998, when Congress passed a joint resolution annexing the Hawaiian Islands, and then later made it into a state in 1959, and the very basics of legislating, as a legislator myself, there's a glaring problem here, besides there not being a treaty.
Science.
As a council member, the very basics of legislating, I know that my legislation only has authority over the county of Hawaii, the edges of the borders of a Hawaii island. So I cannot pass a styrofoam ban for Maui. So how I understand the US claiming to have annexed the Hawaiian Islands would be equivalent of me introducing a resolution, annexing Maui, changing their name to Hawaii County, saying forget the Maui County Code, they now have to follow Hawaii Code. We know that this isn't legally possible. The US cannot pass laws for Canada. Neither can it pass laws for the Hawaiian Kingdom. So even these congressmen, this is in 1898, they were talking about the joint resolution. They said the annexation of Hawaii by joint resolution is unconstitutional. That territory can only be constitutionally acquired by treaty. This was a representative from Texas. Another representative, Senator Beacon from Georgia, said the annexation of a foreign territory is the subject matter of a treaty, and that it cannot be accomplished legally and constitutionally by joint resolution. And even most recently, in 1988, our own US Department of Justice said he was unclear which constitutional power the United States used when it acquired Hawaii. So again, cession and a treaty of peace. There exists no treaty. Okay, so that was heavy. When I learned this was earth-shaking for me. Are there any questions about what I just covered in regard to annexation? Okay, if it's a question though, please keep it a question.
All right. Were we not covered with the same as the Spanish-American War, which included Guam, Puerto Rico, Philippines? Were we not considered under this, but is and wasn't that what instigated? Again, this is basic Hawaiian history. We were included only after the Spanish-American War and our annexation of Puerto Rico from all of the territories in the Spanish-American War. Was that not true? And those were also not by either method remembered.
No, that's not true.
They were by a peace treaty.
What's your question?
Repeat the question.
Okay, ma'am, the question is, were we not acquired?
No. How were Guam, Puerto Rico, the territories of the Spanish-American War, were they by treaty of peace or cessation also, or were they not grandfathered because of our acquisition of those?
No, we were not grandfathered. There was no treaty of peace. The Hawaiian Kingdom is an independent sovereign state.
How were those, you gotta go back to my question, how were those from the Spanish-American War?
It's pretty irrelevant. We're talking about Hawaii.
This is about the Hawaiian Kingdom.
No, it's not. It's exactly.
Okay, well, according to the export, yeah.
Ask Dr. Singh, he should know.
Dr. Sai, would you like to answer that?
I'm not taking it away from Jennifer, but the Spanish-American War actually ended with the Treaty of Peace that was signed in December of 1898 and ratified. It took effect in 1899. So it was a Treaty of Peace. The Hawaiian Kingdom was a joint resolution that was passed July 7, 1898. This was during the Spanish-American War, not when the war ended.
Yeah, the bottom line is, in order for there to be annexation, there needs to be a treaty which cedes a territory to another territory. And there is no treaty. Okay. Are there any other questions? Go ahead.
Hi, sorry. So the owner of a black SUV, license plate ZDR657, you're parked in a residential area, you need to move your vehicle.
Did everybody hear that? A black SUV?
License plate Zulu Delta Romeo 657.
I think you might have found it. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm about to get into is how this relates to my job as a Hawaii County Council member. And it's pretty dense, it's legal, it's complex. So if you have a question, it's okay. Write it down and we'll get to it afterwards. So like I said earlier, there's two states of affairs that a country can be in, a state of war and a state of peace. When a country is in a state of war, the Hague and Geneva Conventions now take effect. So how many of you have actually heard of the Hague and Geneva Conventions? That's pretty good. So I had heard of them, but I had no idea what they said or what they meant. And this is what I learned. The Hague and Geneva Conventions are treaties that were ratified by the United States. And this is Title 18 of the United States Federal Code. It defines war crimes as any breach to any of these international conventions of which the U.S. is a party. So let's see what these conventions say. The penal laws of the occupied territory shall remain in force. This is consistent with what Dr. Desai said, that the laws of the occupied country, the Hawaiian Kingdom, shall be being administered, not the laws of the occupier. Let's see what the Hague Convention says. The authority of the legitimate power having in fact passed into the hands of the occupant, the latter shall take all the measures in his power to restore and ensure, as far as possible, public order and safety, while respecting, unless absolutely prevented, the laws in force in the country. So how does this relate to me as a legislator? Well, let's look at my oath. This is the Supremacy Clause, the United States Constitution, Article 6. It says that all treaties made shall be the supreme law of the land. The senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislators shall be bound by oath to support this Constitution. So this is where my oath comes from. My oath, I swore to support and defend the U.S. Constitution above all else. I've been getting a lot of allegations that by not legislating, that I'm violating my oath. This is my oath in its entirety. Nowhere does it say that I must legislate. However, it does say that I am bound to uphold these U.S. treaties. And these treaties include the Hague and Geneva Conventions. And these Hague and Geneva Conventions, like we covered, specify that the penal laws of the country that we're in need to remain intact and in force. And again, our own federal code defines a war crime as a breach of any of these treaties. So essentially, by legislating, I could be breaking my oath to uphold and support the U.S. Constitution. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So I decided to consult with my county attorney, corporation counsel. And when I say corporation counsel, that means county attorney. I don't know why they call it. He's a corporation counsel. There's only one that the county council can interact with, and that's the top attorney for the entire county. That's Mr. Joe Kamehameha. So I hired an attorney, because as you can see, this is very complex, it's very serious. I don't want to be charged for war crimes. They have no statute of limitations. So I hired an attorney to help me draft my letter to Corporation Counsel. And my attorney also advised me, due to the weight of the question, to refrain from legislating until the Corporation Counsel can assure me that I am not incurring criminal liability. So here's what we asked him. So we use the word specifically assure because legally assure means to put certain beyond all doubt. I want to be certain beyond all doubt that I am not incurring criminal liability. For one, participating in legislation of the Hawaii County Council. And as you can see, we use the specific articles of the Hague and Geneva Conventions, 43 and 64, that were just displayed here, that it appears my legislating is in violation of. I also wanted to know if I was incurring criminal liability for being complicit in the collection of taxes, foreclosures, and prosecutions. And as you can see, we cited each article of the convention that we're concerned about. So it's very specific. So let's see what he said. The next day, this is what he said. These 2.5 sentences. I say half because there's not a period on the second one. So how many of you are familiar with the Torture Memos? And John, Uncle Mabel, you had a question?
Yeah. You know, Camilla, I'm the guy that will contest the sale of kawa. They created this 2%. They will target all the lands in 1994 when the state, the county, went after the lands that they call abandoned lands, the sugar lands and the pineapple lands. All of these are all coming together because I'm the guy that they removed from the land to make all of these things go. They created the trail, the one that goes around the island, to fit all in this program that they got for all of us forever. And I'm still waiting, like her. That's my family land. Camilla, you guys like look at something, go look at about the sale of kawa. I speak 18 minutes, there was 3 of us that went there. I was one of them, my lady right here, Katrina, and Liko Mate. I will speak 18 minutes. Liko will speak 9 or 12 minutes. And it's all there about the land, about these kind of things that they created. And this is, this is why all of these things is coming up. The gigs are, corruption is here.
Thank you, Uncle Abel.
It has to do with all of this. So, Camilla.
Okay, Uncle, if you don't mind, we can talk about that after, okay? Thank you. Back to the torture memos. How many of you have heard of the torture
Guys, I
memos?
won't answer the question.
Okay,
The
2
question.
people.
You won't answer.
Oh, I'm sorry, but was there a question there, Uncle Abel?
The question is this. Corruption. One word. The state and the county and the federal, all it is, they are taking our people and selling them as racketeering. This is all act of war. I've been out there for almost 30 years. The Kapunas will send me out there. We do all of these things about the hair now. Everybody making all of these things, piggyback. Corruption at the highest level. Okay? We want truth. That's what it is. Stop covering up all our lies. Iggy, what he did about the rockets, all of these kind of things is all covered up. All it is. This thing that they like do with the one
Okay,
that put
Uncle
away.
Abel, I'm sorry, but we really need to move on. We have a limited time and we can talk about this afterwards, okay? Okay, thank you for sharing. And this actually isn't a time for questions right now. Let's save until after. But we'll have plenty of time after.
Back to the torture memos.
Okay, the torture memos.
Torture memos.
The John Yu. In 2002, the Department of Defense requested an opinion to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is equivalent to Corporation Counsel at the county level. And they wanted to know if torture was in violation of international treaties and Title 18, which I just displayed here. And at the time, John Yu was an attorney, and he issued an opinion called The Application of Treaties and Laws to Al-Qaeda and Taliban Detainees. He said that the Department of Defense would not incur any criminal liability because international law and the international treaties didn't apply. Later, his opinion was found to be wrong. Now John Yu and all of the members of the armed services that were a part of this, were a part of the torture, cannot travel in Europe or any of the countries that have supported the establishment of the International Criminal Court because they will be prosecuted for war crimes. There is no statute of limitations on war crimes. So he says Article 6. Let's look at Article 6 again. This was precisely the foundation of my question. This is why I'm concerned about my oath. He says, international law cannot violate federal law. Does Article 6 say that anywhere in here? That international law cannot violate federal law?
Only for Empire America.
It's very confusing. My attorney and
I
I
read
cannot...
Article 6, it does not say that anywhere in there.
Thank you.
I
It
read
does
the whole
not. It's
damn
not
thing
true.
yesterday.
So the international law cannot violate federal law. When he says that, according to my attorney, that isn't true. And furthermore, I don't understand how it's relevant to my question. Furthermore, the very basic rules that apply to attorneys in Hawaii, it's called the Hawaii Rules of Professional Conduct, and this applies to all licensed attorneys, including Corporation Counsel. It requires competent handling of a particular matter and analysis of the factual and legal elements of a problem, the use and methods and procedures. His opinion. Does this include factual analysis of the legal elements? Right, and according to Black's Law Dictionary, the definition of assure, again, is to put certain beyond all doubt. I wanted him to assure me that I was not committing war crimes, essentially. This doesn't assure me. And in fact, he doesn't even dispute that Hawaii is illegally occupied. or war crimes against protected persons. So the letter that we had sent him was 11 pages. We have copies in the back for you, if you would like. If you signed up and checked the box, we'll send it to you. There's over 400 pages of attachments. I mean, not over, almost 400 pages of attachments. So it's pretty dense. I wanted a serious legal opinion. So what does this mean for my job now? Considering that he did not dispute that Hawaii is illegally occupied. This means that Corporation Counsel has forced me into the position of being a whistleblower. I did my due diligence. He did not dispute that Hawaii is illegally occupied. So therefore, I am a whistleblower, and there are procedures that dictate my course of action that transitioned me from being that of a legislator to that of a whistleblower. So let's look at what those are. This is Article 29 of the Geneva Convention. It says that the party to the conflict whose hands protected persons may be is responsible for the treatment accorded to them by its agents. The term agent must be understood as embracing everyone who is in the service of a contracting party. So the United States would be a contracting party. And that includes civil servants. That's me. I'm a civil servant. It says that my duty now is to ensure respect for the convention in all circumstances. And it also means that the text of the convention is to be disseminated as widely as possible. So we have copies back there for you. It's on my website, and we will send it to you if you sign up. So what does this mean? Ensure respect for the convention in all circumstances. How am I doing this? Well, I have began to put every agent of the United States concerning the rights of protected persons on notice. I started with Queen's Hospital. I sent this letter to Queen's Hospital last week. I sent this to the CEO of Queen's Hospital last week. It's 10 pages. It's on my website. There's copies back there. I have about 30 copies. So it turns out Queen's Hospital was set up by Queen Emma to provide free health care for Aboriginal Hawaiians. It was the first government-subsidized health care in the world. And after the invasion, the governor of the territory of Hawaii manipulated the charter, causing Aboriginal Hawaiians to believe that they no longer had access to free health care. Article 51 of the Geneva Convention specifies that the occupying power cannot abrogate or remove, or do away with the rights or safeguards afforded to protected persons, especially for children's medical care. War crimes include acts of commission as well as omission. In this case, the crime of omission is the abrogation of Queen's Hospital's free health care to Aboriginal Hawaiians as protected persons as mandated in their charter before the overthrow, is in violation with Article 47 and 51 of the Geneva Convention, therefore would constitute a war crime. Now they are on notice. So what's next? Okay, how many of you believe that there's no foreclosures in Puna? There's plenty of foreclosures in Puna and around the island. So this is the last paragraph of the UN Human Rights Memorandum by Dr. Alfred Desires. He specifies that the state of Hawaii courts should not lend themselves to a flagrant violation of rights. The courts of the state of Hawaii must not enable or collude in the wrongful taking of lands. So how does this relate to protected persons? I sent 30 letters today via certified mail to every state circuit court judge that deals with foreclosures in Hawaii. And I say that as an agent for the United It states, I am bound to ensure respect for the convention in all circumstances, and therefore I call upon you to cease and desist in the wrongful taking of lands from protected persons that are under foreclosure. So when we talk about protected persons, we're talking about United States citizens as well. That doesn't just include Hawaiian subjects. So this is just the beginning. In every one of these letters, I CC the International Criminal Court, the President of the Human Rights Council, the United Nations Independent Expert for the Promotion of Democratic and Equitable International Order, Amnesty International, the Human Rights Watch, and the International Committee of the Red Cross. These are all nonprofits. Well, the last three are nonprofits. They make reports to the International Criminal Court that help the criminal court decide on what investigations to initiate. I will be taking these letters. Well, first of all, this is just the beginning of many letters. I'm going to be sending it to every department of the United States. Sir, we'll get to your question in a minute. I'm almost finished. I'm going to be sending these letters to every department in the state or in the islands having to do with the rights of protected persons. And I'm going to be holding very frequent town halls to keep you updated on what those letters say and what they're meant to do. I'm going to be taking these letters as well as the testimony of protected persons. I don't know how many of you saw, but a few weeks ago there was about 3 hours of testimony of protected persons before the Hawaii County Council requesting that they respect their rights. I'll be taking that along with plenty of other evidence to New York to meet with Amnesty International, the Human Rights Watch, and the International Committee of the Red Cross and request that they appoint a special rapporteur to start documenting the human rights violations in this very strange form of illegal occupation on the Hawaii Islands. So this is my story. As many of you know, I gave up on some very important pieces of legislation that I had actually submitted. And when my attorney advised me that I should refrain from legislating, I was pretty crushed. Many of you know I was working on a building code amendment to help with the affordable housing crisis. I was working on a Roundup bill that would stop the county from spraying Roundup in our waterways. I'd worked on this bill for 6 months, perfecting it. But I had to make a decision based on the facts, the truth, and justice, which is what got me started in politics in the first place. Many of you know me from 10 years ago when I was showing documentaries at the university about the environment and corruption in government, money in politics, war, and I then fought to get Hawaii's first clean elections pilot program, helped getting big money out of politics. I helped get Russell Ruderman elected. I went to Kauai to fight against the GMO companies that were poisoning the children over there. I came back and I actually became a senator at the College of Business and Economics, where I found that there was $70,000 in missing student fees, so I got an audit of the UH system and then was disqualified from running for student government because of it. So then I decided to run for real government. I got elected. And sometimes the truth isn't comfortable. And I am not the type to just stick my head in the sand. And especially if I'm going to be a lawmaker, if I'm going to seek justice through truth and the facts as a lawmaker, then I've got to follow the law. And the law speaks for itself here. So Corporation Counsel has put me in the position of being a whistleblower. And I'm being treated as such. Since I've lost staff, I've lost relationships, the newspaper is painting me to be mentally unstable. They're saying that it's about my dad, which it isn't. I'm being retaliated against for following the law. I'm now being told by the council's chair that I cannot fill my vacant staff position. My website is getting hacked. The police denied my request to have a community police officer here today because I wanted you guys to be safe. West Hawaii Today is going out of their way to publish editorials on me attacking my personal character, completely disregarding the apparent belligerent violations of protected persons' rights and the merits of my question. If we are to be a nation that abides by the rule of law, then we've got to follow the law. If not, what does truth, justice, and liberty for all mean to you as an American? I'm not saying all of you are Americans, but I am. And this, put simply, is what I'm doing. I'm following the law. And again, I'll be holding frequent town halls to keep you updated on what I'm up to. I do have a list of accomplishments of what I have done before August 21st when I made this announcement. And I have a list of accomplishments of everything I've done after. I have been disseminating information to my constituents who are affected by the disaster. Many of you may have followed me from my work with the lava and giving people resources. And I'm attending to constituent needs. Amongst all of this, I'm still here for you. I'm still here for you. Thank you.
Say they were withholding your wages?
Okay, questions, ma'am. You had your hand up for a while. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm going to ask the man back and then you'll be next.
So the question is about statehood. How does the picture of statehood fit into what you're doing?
Actually,
Which is extraordinary.
Could you come up, please?
The question is about statehood. Many people think that it overrode any conflict that we are talking about.
So the vote to become a state was an act of war. That was an illegal action. A government of another country cannot go into another country and then hold an election and then say, therefore now we are the legitimate government. Excuse me? Right, the only way that a country can become a part of another country is by a treaty of peace and cession. Who would have that? I think I need some help. Oh, yeah, you, that's right.
And the subject of Hawaiian citizenship. Do you have a personal definition of that? Does it take in knowledge? Does it take in
I'm going to have to ask the expert on that one.
What's the question?
So the question is, who is a Hawaiian subject? Yeah. So according to Hawaiian Kingdom law, as it was in 1893, before they take over the government, you can acquire citizenship three ways. One, birth on the soil, natural born. So an example of that type of person would be Sanford Dole. So Sanford Dole's parents were actually American, but he was born in the Hawaiian Kingdom, so he became a Hawaiian subject, natural born. The next way you can become a Hawaiian subject is being born abroad from Hawaiian parents. And that's a term called jus sanguinis, parentage. So if a Hawaiian family, Hawaiian subject family, travels to Washington, D.C., and the wife gives birth in Washington, D.C., that child is an American by birth, natural born, but a Hawaiian by parentage. That's a dual citizen. Okay? And then the other way is that if you reside in the Hawaiian Kingdom, for 5-year residency requirement, you can apply for naturalization. So you can apply. So it was not based on race, it was based on law. Now for natives, Maoli, Kanaka, they were already Hawaiian subjects from the beginning. And any person with native blood today is a Hawaiian subject. They don't have to prove it. Now, if you're not a Hawaiian subject, you would have to show that you are a direct descendant of a Hawaiian subject that is not native, who was a Hawaiian subject before the overthrow of the government. Now, this is precisely what was going on in the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, because they were actually discriminating against Ukrainians who were actually born in Estonia before the occupation in 1941. They were actually denying their Estonian citizenship. The Estonian government eventually began to report to the Human Rights Council on how they're fixing that problem. Now, any person born in Estonia, which would apply to Hawaii, during the occupation, international law allows only one way to acquire citizenship, and that's from your parents. Not being born on the soil and not being naturalized. So anybody who is a direct descendant today of a Hawaiian subject that was in 1893, irrespective of race, color, creed, or gender, is a Hawaiian subject today. Now, protected persons, though, under international law, applies to Americans, applies to Hawaiian subjects, applies to Japanese, applies to all civilians within occupied territory. So there's a different issue there with regard to the Geneva Convention.
Thank you, Dr. Sai. Go ahead.
Two questions.
You know what, how about everyone who has questions, you can please just come up over here. Actually, yeah, just come up over here. That way everyone can hear your question and be involved.
I have two questions. The first question is, for many of us who are now aware that the status is that we are in allegiance to the Hawaiian Kingdom Constitution, the Hawaiian Kingdom laws, you know, just in case there's any confusion about how great those laws are, you know, I think some people might not know that it's really a great system also to pledge allegiance to, but are not aware of what the laws actually are. That they are really progressive. It was basically like America, like that's what Americans.
Speak into the mic.
Okay, yeah. I was just, the question was, I wondered if we could be reassured, maybe against our wild imaginations, potentially as to what the actual laws of Hawaiian Kingdom are, because we are now understanding that we are to be in allegiance with those. So it'd be nice to know what they are, and then to get that they're really good for us. You know, that we'd be glad to be in allegiance with them by knowing that they're that good. So I'm kind of wondering if you could, you know, kind of give us that comforting response as to the nature of those laws. I'm sure they're great already. So that's my first question. My second question is, does this situation require something like a United States of America embassy to be built, so that, or is the situation already such that those needs are being addressed?
Great question. So the first one, the Hawaiian Kingdom laws they're online. So you can see what those laws are and make a decision for yourself on how you feel about them. Though they were very progressive as far as how I understand them. The embassy, yes. I'm going to give this over to Dr. Sai. So just so you guys know, my attorney is here, Stephen Laudig, and Dr. Keanu Sai was kind enough to join us. He is one of Hawaii's leading experts in U.S. constitutional law and international law, and on the continuity of the Hawaiian Kingdom. He's been admitted in 7 different court cases, criminal and civil, as an expert testifier. And he's also the lead agent in representing the Hawaiian Kingdom at The Hague in the Netherlands. So we'll let him answer this.
I just want to make sure that there's clarity with this, because the question was pretty specific on laws, right? Now, we all would know that the laws of 1893 are old. It's not what we're following now. So we need to understand that. When the legislature was not brought into session to legislate as a result of the government being overthrown, the laws just remained the law. There was no update. There was no change as the country evolves through time. Okay, so the law of occupation says the occupier must administer the laws of the occupied state. That was supposed to have happened in 1893, not now. What's coming now is the fact that they didn't do that, and that's what's creating this firestorm. Okay, so let's not put Jennifer in a pickle, or she's at fault for bringing it out. She's just a whistleblower that said this should have happened 125 years ago. Right now, we're just getting caught with it. Now, the issue here is to comply with the law of occupation according to the Hague Geneva Conventions. That's what the UN official said, right? So the first step is to comply. The next step, which the question was, well, what are the laws? It's going to be a slow process to bring those laws up to date, right? Without blowing this place up economically, politically, and legally, right? So that's a given. So that we understand. Now, when I finished my doctoral dissertation, my doctoral committee actually asked me that question. When I showed that Hawaii was occupied, and the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom applied in 1893, and they haven't been administered since. Well, that's clearly what the law says. What they asked me was, how do you fix the problem? And that's coming from an academic standpoint, not from a political standpoint. So actually my doctoral dissertation gets into chapter 5, how do you begin to right the wrong? And to begin to right the wrong is to be educated, is to be brought aware of what's happening, right? Now, basically, the plan is this. The law of occupation allows, but it hasn't started yet, but it will be. And this is what Jennifer knows, it will be. Is that basically all the laws that we are operating under today will be the provisional laws of the occupied state, so long as these specific laws do not run contrary or against Hawaiian Kingdom law from 1893. So all of a sudden, driver's license, all of a sudden, GMO, all of a sudden this, it all pops up. But that doesn't take place until the occupier says that. They haven't yet. We're dealing with the blowback. Right? So what I can assure you is there's a way to fix the problem without blowing this place up. And that's what's important. And the last question that I heard was, should the United States establish an embassy? No. The U.S. had an embassy in Honolulu. Actually, the U.S. embassy was where on Alakea Street in Honolulu. You know where Hawaiian Tel is? Did you know that used to be the American embassy? Yeah. Now, there's no reason to form an embassy. The issue here, as the UN official said, which is what a lot of research has already confirmed in the academy and the university, you must begin to comply with the law of occupation. That's number one. And that's where we're at right now. So all these other things will come in time, but you can't put the carriage in front of the horse. The first step is awareness and education. And I just gotta say, after watching Jennifer in her presentation, because I teach at UH, I would have given her an A.
First of all, I hope you haven't given your salary up, because somebody asked me on the bus, is she still getting it out? My question is, Jim, by the way, you should not have told me to ask or not to ask questions, that's not your business. I came to Hawaii, first of all, I've been in the United States since 1960, and in the Air Force, going through pilot training, here for 8 years. And someone who calls himself the Attorney General of the Hawaiian Kingdom, who for me now I know is a two-faced person, did you have a passport when you came here from the Kingdom of Hawaii? I thought I was going halfway to paradise, the real paradise. That's why I came. I didn't know about the Kingdom of Hawaii. I had a valid US passport. Should I have, and this was in a private gathering, he kept asking, should I have had a passport from the Hawaiian Kingdom before?
No. Okay, so passports are basically international IDs of someone's nationality or citizenship. Okay, so if you're an American citizen, then you have an American passport. So when you go to another country, you are protected as that citizenry, right? Now, the way you can acquire citizenship, and I'll share this story with you. When I was at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in the Netherlands, people who were working in the registry, I noticed some of them had more than 4 passports. More than 4. And I asked, aren't you only supposed to have 1? They said, oh no, it's all based on parentage. So if their great-grandmother was from Portugal, they provide the birth certificate to go to Portugal at some consulate or embassy, and to prove the genealogy, they then get a passport. So their passports stem from their citizenship that they've acquired through parentage. Now the primary passport is where you live, because where you live, or what is called where you're domiciled, is where you vote. So because you had more than 4 passports, that doesn't mean you vote in 4 elections. You only vote in one country where you're domiciled in. A lot of people in America don't know this stuff. They think you need 1 passport. Actually, most countries do not prohibit their citizens from becoming American through naturalization, where they still will not lose their citizenship from that country. And that is recognized by France. That is recognized by other countries. So that's another aspect of this. So you didn't need to get, if you're not from the Hawaiian Kingdom, you don't get a passport. Now, to get a passport now, and I want to make sure I clear this up, this is not about a sovereignty movement or a sovereignty group trying to claim something that they're not. This is about law, it's about compliance, it's about facts. So I did watch Joe Kamehameha on the video when they were videotaping it, and he was trying to equate Jennifer's letter from his attorney to the Native Hawaiian sovereignty movement, but yet he admitted he didn't read Jennifer's letter. And I was really taken aback when I watched that. I'm like, what you should have said was, Councilwoman Ruggles, I'll get back to you with that answer. That's how you're supposed to respond, and not build this up as if it's a Native Hawaiian sovereignty movement and Jennifer jumped on board with the activists. So I really appreciate Jennifer's presentation where she was able to clarify that. And I was taken aback with Jennifer's history. I mean, you were always a whistleblower. Whistleblowers aren't bad. Whistleblowers are good. Yeah.
What is written in the international laws and the United Nations, we as a country don't give a damn about. We break every law of every country. We are a military empire. For the first time, a nation has succeeded to create a worldwide empire through our bases, through submitting people in the thing called SOFA, a Status of Forces Agreement, that if an American commits a crime, you cannot try them in your court. It's taking the sovereignty of the country out. That is how Khomeini got famous. He stood up to the Shah. I was here. Now we are violating every right. How many of you have seen today's paper that Mr. Giuliani, on behalf of the President of the United States, says that we are going to overthrow the government of Iran within 2 months, and maybe it might take as many as 2 years.
Aloha, Jenny. My name is Tom Gagne. Thank you for asking the question. I'm here this evening because I read what you were, what this issue is about, and at that same day, or soon that day or that week, I have received a letter from the government telling me, mandating me, that I have to register for jury duty. Now, my thought right away that came to me is that under the same things that you have pointed out here, am I, as a citizen, going to be liable for war crimes if my mandated jury duty causes punishment onto the folks here in Hawaii or the protected individuals? That's what I think.
Great answer, Tom, and great question, Tom. So I'm going to just answer one part of the question that I do know, which is that in a state of war, all court proceedings should happen through a Article 2 court. The courts here are Article 3 courts, they're judicial. So there's three branches of the government. There's the executive, there's the legislative, and then there's the, my brain is farting right now. Judicial, thank you. Okay, so our current proceedings are through the judicial branch, and they should be, in a time of war, through the executive branch. Every person in Hawaii, well, mostly every person is a protected person, and that means that they have a right to a fair trial. So that means that they have a right to be tried in a court of competent jurisdiction. So by trying somebody in a third article court of the judiciary, the United States is in fact violating their rights as a protected person to a fair trial. Now, as far as what you should do, I might have to defer to one of you guys. Do you guys have an answer? Okay. Awesome. So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for
Where
you,
do we
Tom.
ask the question? Who do we ask that question before it's that answer? Before any of us are jurors, and before any of us are guilty of war crimes, who do we ask that, like you have done? Who do we force that answer from?
Okay, the question is who do we, the people, ask if we're called on jury duty?
Okay, Steve is supposed to take this, but because it will venture into attorney-client matters, if, you know, that's why he's refraining. So,
In terms of question and answer, but I don't want to create, not that I don't like you all, I've not met you, but I don't want to establish an attorney-client relationship with everyone in the room who's concerned with jury duty. But we can ask questions that you can come to your own reasonable conclusion and assure yourself. So when you receive a notice, is it a notice under Hawaiian Kingdom law? Yes or no? Is that an answer that you can be assured of? I'm sorry, I don't like mics. I think I'm loud enough to be heard without a mic.
No.
I'm told to use the mic. So you ask yourself, is this a proceeding under Hawaiian Kingdom law? Yes or no? Well, if the answer is no, then you have your answer. And you are assured, based upon this presentation, based upon the logic of the presentation, you can assure yourself by becoming literate in the law and learning or understanding the law. I hope that is a satisfactory answer, although it may not be a happy answer.
I'm sorry, Tom, that's the best we have for you.
We're trying to get to where Hawaiian Kingdom law is applied. So ideally, what steps would happen? You talked about a rapporteur, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'll throw some things out. International Criminal Court, the Hague Convention. Anyway, ideally, what steps would need to happen for the Hawaiian Kingdom law to start to be applied?
And what steps need to happen for the Hawaiian Kingdom law to start to be applied? This is it's a simple and it's a very complex question. And from my knowledge, from what I've read, is the first step was that the governor would need to transform Hawaii's government into a military government and start applying, to actually start complying with the laws of occupation and start administering the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom. Do you have anything to add?
okay, so how do you fix the problem, right? How do you apply the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom, given it's 125 years old, right? We still live today. Now, a few years ago, I had 3 meetings with Mike McCartney, Chief of Staff, of Governor Ige. And I approached him in these 3 meetings that lasted 1.5 hours each, spread out within 3 to 4 weeks. As I explained to him the problem that Hawaii is in, this is the solution to fix the problem. And under the Hague Convention, what do you define the state of Hawaii as? If Congress created the state of Hawaii in a foreign country, that's not a government. That's like creating a government in the state of London, right? But it exists in London. What do you still call that? Well, the state of Hawaii is in effective control of all territory. There is no doubt, right? They are in control, but they're not a government. The trick is how to transform itself into a government recognizable under international law, the laws of occupation. And there is actually a way to do that, which is in U.S. Army Field Manual 27-5, which I provided the pertinent parts to Mike McCartney. And this is how it works. The state of Hawaii's constitutional system, I'm not saying it's a government, but it's like constitution and bylaws of an organization, can transform itself into a military government by declaring martial law. The governor can declare that, martial law, just like what the governor did, Poindexter, in 1941 after Pearl Harbor attack. And then appointed General Smart the military governor. And they began to administer the laws under martial law. For Hawaii now, the governor can actually, under the state of Hawaii Constitution, proclaim martial law, right? And then the military governor to replace that person has to be somebody informed and educated and knowledgeable of the laws of occupation. And that would actually be the adjutant general of the state of Hawaii. He's a 2-star general, General Logan. He's in the National Guard. They were trained in the laws of occupation in War College, right? That's their background. And they were deployed, a lot of us know, many National Guardsmen were deployed to Iraq. They had to be educated in that system. So in this case, I'm not saying it's General Logan. What I'm saying is it's the Adjutant General that would then be in that position within the procedures. And then he could make a proclamation, he should, that all laws illegally imposed in Hawaii since the occupation will be the provisional laws of the occupied state, so long as these laws do not run contrary to the letter, spirit, and intent of Hawaiian Kingdom law. See, all of a sudden, he just provided a transition. And that was actually covered in my doctoral dissertation in chapter 5. There's actually a procedural process in this madness, right? Now, I'm not saying individuals, what I'm saying is positions that are in authority need to take certain steps. They haven't done that yet, which is what Jennifer is presenting and others are becoming aware of. But I just wanted to let you know that there is a way to fix the problem and not just have this place blow up like lava is just covering all of us. No, we don't have to get burned, but we do need to get educated.
Thanks, Jen. I really appreciate the information that you shared with us tonight. One of the questions that has crossed my mind is that you are our councilwoman, District 5, and you have become a whistleblower, understanding. This is a smart wahine. She came from Hawaii CC. I worked there for many years. The question becomes, will you continue to be our 5th District Council member until the end of your term while you educate the people of what we're concerned about? Or will you resign and continue your fight?
Great question. So, what I presented today was that there are procedures for somebody in my position, an agent of a contracting party of the United States, to ensure respect for the convention in all circumstances. That's my job. And so as that agent, that's what I am doing. As a representative that was elected, I believe it's my duty to continue to represent my district and represent the protected persons that are my constituents. The majority of my constituents are protected persons, and they deserve representation. By to continue legislating at the county council would not be doing my job, knowing what we know now. Because then I would be violating the rights of my constituents. So now it is my duty as an agent of the United States to continue to represent and to be continuing to advocate on behalf of protected persons. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. So we have some more questions.
Jen, I want to really thank you for what you're doing, and I'm an American, and I'm really ashamed that, what's going on. I didn't learn about it until there was submerged crown lands. I said, wait, we don't have crown lands in America, and then somebody said, oh, you've never heard about the overthrow, and I was like in real shock. But this letter, from the human rights, Dr. Zayas and whatnot, when I first read it, I realized it actually confirms, and I wanted to know if you've ever heard of this, it's called violations of conditions of statehood. And so in the Admission Act, I've seen a sworn signed copy of it, and basically it says, and I know that the county, like open space, Joseph Kamel, etc., they're saying they depend on everything what the court does. So if the court says it, well, they'll go ahead and act upon it as far as land is concerned. And so basically when it says for the violations of conditions of statehood that the judicial system in Hawaii must uphold the Hawaiians' culture and religion. And if they cause the Hawaiians to diminish, then Congress can sue the state of Hawaii and remove their statehood. And so I just wonder if you ever had heard of that, because the letter mentions ongoing plundering of the Hawaiians' lands, to do with Hawaiian Kingdom issued lands. And I know in the court right now, like we're dealing with, say, like Ka'u Sunshine out in Ka'u, basically the law of 1872, where it states that the heirs, that the rights of the heirs remain inure even if the land's been alienated or sold. And that's now HRS 172-11. But the police had never heard about it, sheriffs hadn't heard about it. It was actually RICO. In the case with Uncle Abel, we brought it up even to the Corporation Council, and they just wanted to be, right, instead of actually following the law. That was basically the impression. So I think this letter, and I just want to know if you agree, do you think what's going on, we have enough violations of conditions of statehood, and I'm saying this as an American to support the Hawaiians, that they should have their country back, and basically this letter qualifies as violations of conditions of statehood.
I'm not sure how to answer your question, sorry. Well, the thing is statehood in itself was fraudulent, from what I understand. So I think the conditions of the statehood would fit in that same category.
Because even this letter from Human Rights to the UN, the minute I read it, I was like, wow, that qualifies violations of conditions of statehood that the United States had state of Hawaii agree upon and signed.
Okay, thanks.
So first, thank you. I am new to Hawaii. I've only been here for a few months. I don't consider myself a citizen really of anywhere. I've been to 12 countries this year. I don't believe in borders. I don't believe in a lot of this. So, when it comes to nations and things like that, I believe that we're humans and we live on planet Earth. That's my philosophy. But what I'm looking at is the international law, which you brought up a lot of good points that I didn't know about before. But what I'm seeing here is that in 1949, we're talking about the Hague Convention and the Geneva Convention, but we're talking about treaties that were established long before that, in 1873, and things like that. So I'm just wondering how retroactively can international law go back? So there's been a lot of treaties violated, not only by the US, but by every country. I mean, even in Hawaii, there was a lot of wars for 900 years, you know. Maui took Hawaii, Hawaii took Maui, and Oahu, and back and forth. There's a lot of wars and a lot of conquests. So there's been conquest for all of human history. So if we're talking about a 1949 law and international law, how far can that go back, and how many wrongs can we right with that law? Is it even possible? So.
Great question. As I learned and read about the Geneva Conventions and how they relate to the 1800s, is back then they weren't actually in writing, but there were customary traditions that were considered to be international law that the countries agreed upon. And those were codified in the first Geneva Convention, but they still existed before then. But as far as how far back that goes,
That's a good question, because when you look at the first Hague Convention, it was actually 1899. But the overthrow of the Hawaiian government was 1893, so that's 6 years before, right? And then the 1899 Hague Convention was superseded in 1907, which is what we currently know today, and which the United States refers to in Title 18, Section 2441, as far as war crimes. So violations of the 1907 Hague Conventions and the 1949 Geneva Conventions constitute war crimes. So how does that apply to 1893? And I covered this in my dissertation as well, right? And it's recognized principle. You have what is called customary international law. Now, customary international law is where each country accepts. Now, every country has to accept it as the law to be custom, right? If you have a few holdouts, it's not recognized. When I speak of customary international law, I'm referring to international law, which applies to independent states, not every other nation. So when Kamehameha conquered Oahu through the Battle of Nuuanu, that was not under or regulated by international law. That was actually regulated by the kapu, which is the legal system that existed at that time. Now, once Kamehameha I joined the British Empire in 1794, you folks notice the Union Jack is on the flag? Hawaii wasn't a colony, it was actually part of the British Empire. Hawaii joined the British Empire. Now it became of Great Britain, and now international law would apply. So you actually see some letters, a couple letters that were sent to King George III from Kamehameha, asking him about his neutrality and protection from the British, right? Because a lot of people were at war with the British Empire, okay? Now, once Hawaii became an independent state in 1843, when Great Britain recognized it, then Hawaii became a part of international law, which began in 1843. And the customary practices that applied to England or Great Britain would now also apply to the Hawaiian Kingdom. Now, what happened in the 1860s was the move toward codifying the laws of war. And actually the first country to actually begin that codification was the United States in, I believe, 1863, the Lieber Code, 1861, the Lieber Code. Lieber actually came up with the laws of war that was applied during the Civil War. That was then later picked up by Europe, and they began to have conferences in Brussels, 1872, I believe, right? And then Oxford began to address it. And that culminated in the first conference in 1899 in The Hague, Netherlands, which included the United States, where they're all going to agree to the Hague Convention, which codifies existing customary law, not new law, right? And it is recognized that the Hague Convention is merely codification of existing law. That's important to know. And then it was superseded in 1907. And then when we have 1949 Geneva Conventions, the reason why the countries got together in Geneva to address the Geneva Conventions was because of the maltreatment and murders of civilians during World War II. That was the reason for the Geneva Conventions to be formed, and in particular, Geneva Convention number 4, the 4th Geneva Convention that applies to civilians, which you saw Jennifer referring to. That's where that came from. Because prior to 1949, civilians weren't really protected. They were subject to their country to protect them. When the Geneva Convention came out, in 1949, they said, no, this applies to protect civilians in all circumstances. Even if one country says they annexed the territory, they said the convention still applies because that's still occupied territory. Now that part right there was making specific reference to what Germany was doing in unilaterally annexing Luxembourg, Belgium. And they said, no, that's all illegal. So Hawaii became a part of international law from 1843, not before. Okay? And to give you an idea of how many countries actually existed in 1893, independent states, there were only 44. Today, the UN is made up of 193. In 1945, when the UN was formed, only 46 countries, 46 independent states. The reason why you had more members of the UN was because these countries were decolonizing their empires, right? So East Timor became an independent state that used to be a Portuguese colony, right? So that's what you started to have. For Hawaii, though, these laws definitely apply, but it only applies if Hawaii was an independent state in 1893 when its government was illegally overthrown. And that is already confirmed. It was an independent state. Now we're dealing with the ramifications of that with regard to international law.
Well, hi, my name is Jerry Farrell. I am a resident of Hilo. I was born and raised on Hawaii.
Put the mic up.
I was born in the Hawaiian culture. I was surrounded by it. Although my family came from the Azores originally, I was born in the Hawaiian culture. The reason why I'm here, to tell you the truth, is this young lady. She hasn't met me until tonight. I was stunned by the announcement of her courage. I was stunned by it. And when I heard it, it made me take notice. I'm a former therapist, a behavioral health therapist. And when people who normally don't express courage, or are not widely known for their courage, when they do come out as courageous, that is when I stand up. And that is when I want to say to that person, are you willing to teach it? Are you willing to teach the process of courage that you came about? That's a tough question. Because the other question is, how many other people on the board are leaning toward you and what you have done? How many? There's a lot of brothers and sisters in this room right now that are leaning toward you. They love what you did. And they, for me, I want to ask you, is there anything I can do? You're doing it. But when I was a kiki, I thought it was very, very different than what it is right now. I just turned 76. And my memory is long. Very, very long on how it used to be. I remember being in elementary school, somebody handing me the United States flag and me handing it back. The reason why I handed it back is because my grandparents, my grandmothers, were telling us back then, this isn't real. This is not true. This isn't the way it is. This is the way other people want it to be. But it's not. truth. I still hold on to that experience. And so when I sit at home and I listen to the news and what Jenny did, I want that. Right? I want that to happen. The chances are, if I can continue to practice that, I will not go to jail again. I've been in jail twice because I am a Kanaka Hawaiian. I'm Hawaiian national. I'm not an American. They want me to be an American. They want me to behave like an American. My statement to them is not that I won't do that. I can't do it. I don't know how. It doesn't come from my heart. It doesn't come from my na'au. I don't know how. I can do what she does. I'm so much.
Thank you. Christine?
I was hoping to get a little bit of clarity because this person here asked you about what your duties continue to be. And I noticed there was this list that Nelson put together. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about that and help us understand, like, are you going to your office? Are you there? If we call you, will you be there? And then I have a question for Steve, if he would so kindly want to answer it. I'm very curious about that choice of the word in Kamehameha's letter, opine, when Jennifer asked for an assurance. And I wondered if you had any comments on the difference between opining and assuring.
Would you answer that, Steve?
I'll answer it.
Okay, I actually don't know the difference between opine and assure. I mean, okay, assure, I do know what assure means. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Thanks. So, what I have, wait, Christine, you're asking what I have done since I made my announcement?
Well, are you in your office?
Yes. I'm in my office every day.
And if we had to call you?
Yes, please continue to call me, even if it has nothing to do with international law or your status. I mean, we've gotten 40 complaints. We were just counting today of people calling that we've followed up with for them. So my job is I serve as a liaison between the public and the county departments. So when somebody has a complaint, they complain about a road or school cross guards, how to apply for FEMA, what their options are, they call me, and then I go as a liaison. Well, first I try to help them figure out what their actual problem is, and then what we can do about it. And then I go to the departments and I get answers for them, or I take action, or I file complaints for them. And that's really 80% of my job, even as a legislator. We meet every 2 weeks for 2 days to legislate. Other than that, I'm in my office and I'm responding to constituents. We get 20 calls a day, 40 emails. Most recently was the flooding. And so I've been working with FEMA to put together what options people have, especially in Hawaiian Acres. Because, man, Puna, don't even get me started how the short end of the stick that Puna has gotten and how the county treats Puna. So there's a lot of work that I have to do for that. There is this list back here. I don't know if I want to just read the whole thing to you. It's probably really boring. But yeah, thank you, Christine.
So if anybody wants to see the list, we have it in the back.
Yes, this list of my accomplishments is in the back. Yeah. Yes, and the things that I continue to do. So don't hesitate to call me. Now for your other question.
Thanks. I'm not sure my opinion about what opine is as important as what the dictionary's fact about what the meaning of opine is. It's a verb. Opine. Speak up. Speak out. Animadvert. That's one word. New word to me. Sound off. Express one's opinion openly and without fear or hesitation. We've heard that this evening. Think, opine, suppose, imagine, reckon, guess, expect, believe, or suppose. What he opined, I don't consider an opinion. If I am given a difficult problem to solve, and the person giving me that problem says, I want an answer, and I also want to know how you got the answer. I want to be able to retrace your step. How did you get from this side of the river to the other side of the river? Did you build a bridge? Did you take a path? I want to be able to recreate it. It's kind of like a math question in 7th grade, right? This is the question. I want your answer, and show me how you got there. Now, his answer is an answer. It's a statement. It's a conclusion. But I draw no comfort from it because I don't know how he got there. An opinion in a legal sense is a series of reasoned statements based upon facts to get you from point A to point B. Now, I opine that that is not an opinion.
So in regards to public education and awareness and raising awareness, I'll have to ask you a question, but I'll let you defer. So, Dr. Sept, I was wondering if you could give us an update on the 3-judge fact-finding panel.
Thank you. Good question. So the Permanent Court of Arbitration, the case that Jennifer was referring to, Larson versus the Hawaiian Kingdom. Lance Larson, who's also in Jennifer's district, Mountain View, right, was alleging that the Hawaiian government, which is a restored government similar to governments in exile during occupations, was liable for allowing American laws to be imposed in Hawaii, which led to his unfair trial and incarceration. Right? So actually the whole case was about the unlawful imposition of American law. Now before the court could accept the case, as Jennifer noted, was they first had to verify that the Hawaiian Kingdom still exists as a country. And once they did confirm that, because only its government was overthrown, not the country, then it had to verify whether or not the acting government can actually represent the country. So they had to look at how it was established. And it followed the same logic as other governments during exile. Governments in exile during occupation. In fact, it followed almost to the letter of how the Belgian government in exile was formed in London after Belgium was invaded and King Leopold was captured by the Germans. There was actually a provision in the Belgian constitution for a council of regency. It's amazing that that provision in the Belgian Constitution of 1821, I believe the year was 1821, the Hawaiian Kingdom had that same provision in the Constitution of 1864, because it was a constitutional monarch. So, what came out of that case was that the judges determined that without the United States participating, they cannot rule on whether or not the United States violated Lance Larson's rights, and then, secondary, hold the Hawaiian government accountable for the violation of those rights. The first issue is whether or not the United States, if the court can determine that the United States violated their rights. Now, under the rules of international law dealing with courts, because you don't have subpoena powers, you can't force a country to come into a court, right? But the United States was invited, and they chose not to come in, but they entered into an agreement with the acting government to have access to all records and pleadings. So actually, there was an exchange of agreement brokered by the Permanent Court of Arbitration. So Lance Larson basically lost his case against the acting government because without the United States, he can't proceed to come after the acting government. It's called an indispensable third-party rule. But what the court did in its decision, it said that the parties could resort to another procedure where you don't need the United States there. And that's called International Fact-Finding Commission of Inquiry, called fact-finding. And at the Permanent Court of Arbitration, there have only been 5 fact-finding commissions of inquiry. Now, what the fact-finding commission of inquiry do, what their function is, they serve similar to a grand jury. So the question then is, they're not going to rule that the United States, they're not going to make a decision the United States violated its rights, but as a grand jury type of entity, they will look at the facts and determine probable cause that yes, these certain individuals violated Lance Larson's rights. But it's up to another court to prosecute the war crimes, not the Commission of Inquiry. So that was actually put in the arbitration award in 2001. It's in the international law reports. Now, we didn't take them up on that recommendation until 2 years ago. And as my deputy agent, Federico Lenzerini, a professor of University of Siena in Italy, he's my deputy agent. Lance Larson was represented by an attorney, Dexter Kayama. We entered into an agreement to go to fact-finding. And that fact-finding established the commissioners with 3 of them. They agreed to be a part of it. One of them is Professor Shabas. His background is war crimes and human rights. He actually wrote an article on criminal intent, whether that applies to war crimes. Well, these people came in and agreed to be a part of the commission. So we were actually getting ready last year to have the hearing, the first hearing of the fact-finding commission of inquiry on the grounds of Iolani Palace at the Kanaina building. Oh, there was big moves. I mean, security was even involved. Former police officers running a security firm. Everybody's getting involved. And then we find out that the Permanent Court of Arbitration Secretary General told the commissioners that the Permanent Court is not recognizing these fact-finding commission of inquiry proceedings because the Hawaiian Kingdom is not a member of the United Nations. So when you think about that, wait, not a member of the United Nations. First of all, in order to go to the court, do you need to be a member of the United Nations? Actually, no. Switzerland was not a member of the United Nations until 2002. But they held hearings at the Permanent Court of Arbitration because they were a contracting power, because the Permanent Court of Arbitration was formed in 1899. The Hague Convention #1. So that prompted me to contact my deputy agent, Federico Lenzerini, to inquire, where is he coming from? Well, we get a letter stating it from the Secretary General. Now, this is what I'm going, wait a minute. This is not right because we were already at The Hague. The hearings were held and the tribunal recommended we go to fact-finding. It's not like we came up with this on our own. It's all procedural. We found out that there is probable cause and evidence that the Secretary General of the Permanent Court of Arbitration was acting as an agent for the United States to obstruct the proceedings. So a complaint was filed with what is called the Administrative Council of the Permanent Court of Arbitration to bring that out. Now what's amazing is the position of Secretary General saying that Hawaii is not a member of the United Nations so they can't have the hearing, which doesn't make sense, was actually what the United States was actually saying when Palestine tried to become a member of the Permanent Court of Arbitration 2 years ago. And the United States was blocking it. So they had a meeting of the Administrative Council, which is made up of all the countries that ratified the treaty that formed the court. And the United States was making the claim that Palestine cannot be a member of the Permanent Court of Arbitration, a treaty partner, because they're not a member of the United Nations. Now, for them to use that argument with us, it's like apples and oranges. But to me, what it shows, there's a direct nexus to that statement by the Secretary General to the United States. Now, if anything, that only adds to our situation that it's proving our point. Now, the Commission, all that needs to take place is for the Permanent Court of Arbitration to begin the administrative aspect of the proceedings, because they're the ones who provide the interpreters. They're the ones who provide the facilities, the management of the situation. They're like a clerk of a court. All that needs to be done is change that, and it begins. Now, once that begins, With regard to Lance Larson's case, state of Hawaii officials, where he was put on trial in the old courthouse right over here, that's where it happened. The question then is, the judge, the sheriffs, the police, are they liable for prosecution of war crimes? That's what these proceedings were going to be addressing. Can you understand why they needed to obstruct it? But by obstructing it, they didn't negate it. It just, they showed their hand again. So, again, it's awareness, and people in Europe are beginning to understand this. But for what Jennifer has done, it has taken it to another level. Because this is an official of the United States who is making the same points that we are making in these proceedings. Yeah. So the case, as far as the, where are you? Who asked the question? It's ongoing. It can actually have, the first hearing can take place anytime. The agreement is still binding. So we're still bound by the agreement to go to fact-finding. Right now we're just dealing with obstruction by the Secretary General, who we say has a direct nexus to the United States, because he's definitely saying the same thing that he was saying for Palestine. Now, why would the Secretary General be saying that thing? Secretary General is actually Dutch. He's not supposed to be saying those things. So I hope I answered that question. But when it happens, all you folks will hear about it.
How long do you think?
What?
How long do you think? What's your guess?
As soon as, see, okay, so you have a river, right? And a lot of, like, remember the water, because I lived up Mount, I lived Glenwood, 52 inches we got. Okay, you saw that river's going down, right? A lot of crap is being brought in, and it's being clogged. Then it starts to go out. Okay, what we have here is it's clogged. The water's still there. All we got to do is remove the debris, and it goes. That's really how simple it is. We don't have to redo anything. We just got to remove the debris that is obstructing the flow. Thank you.
Microphone.
O mahi ai koe noa, hamana au o lelo Hawaii, o lelo au li'i. I'm going to turn around so you can see one of the things I do, one of the activist things I do. And shortly after Jen took office, I went to Jen and said, we have this issue. Jen knew it because I live in Mountain View. Jen lives in Mountain View. Anybody that lives anywhere on Hawaii Island knows the issue because it happens to you every day. And Jen was one of the first council members I went to. And Jen was so eager, and she wanted to do it right. She asked me questions, what can I do? Because what we were asking Jen to do was write a letter to the congressional delegation advocating for the solution. And Jen did just that. And that was done in the summer of 2017. And you can read Jen's letter if you go on highcop.org, and you see Jen's beautiful picture sitting on that website, and you click on Jen, you can read the wonderful letter she wrote. Now the good doctor met with Mike McCartney, I figured, for 4.5 hours. 3 1.5-hour sessions. I met with Mike McCartney also on this issue. Obviously, Mike McCartney didn't hear what the good doctor said because you haven't seen anything happen, have you? And Mike McCartney didn't hear what I said either. So I went to the governor. I don't know whether you went to the governor or not, but I've met with the governor numerous times. And I said, Governor, you need to take care of your constituents. We elected you to take care of the constituents. And I say the same thing to Mayor Harry Kim, and I say the same thing to Brian Schatz. And I met with all of them. I say the same thing to Hirano. I say the same thing to Garbutt.
That's the question. Yeah, that's your question. Yes.
I'm here supporting Jen, and the question would be, there is a way to have the government recognize what you're asking to do. But it takes the right person to do it. And I'm going to hand you these slips when you leave this room, and I hope you come to these meetings and you meet who I believe is the person that will be running this government come January, that will listen to what the good doctor has to say and will look for a solution which I haven't been able to find. So my question is there someone here in this government that you think will stand up to the issue and provide the answer and the solution? I'm going to hand you this on the way out. I think this is the answer. Mahalo nui loa.
My answer to that is no, I don't know. Uncle Abel.
Alo ai, alo kaku, ano ai, kia. You know, we've been waiting for a long time. Our queen said something. We're an honest American. You're looking at them. After all these years, someone will come up and stand for truth and for righteousness. For the country. And for the things that we believe in the government. But she took on something that is so heavy. God is watching everybody. She can open up a lot of doors. In fact, she will open up a lot of doors. You know what I mean? Now everybody is a kind on that kind. Because Hawaii has been waiting for a long time, and the people, the suffering. She's the one that opened up the door, oh, honest American, and there's a whole bunch of them right here in front of my big fat nose. They're standing up for truth. And that's what we need. Our government, or whatever it is, they all get... Anyway, so we need to clean house. And we need to bring back truth. Because you see him in a spot, you see him all like that, the president making comments about the guys not saluting the flag and then more rights. So yeah, you see the Mexicans, they all standing up and the president saying all kind of stuff, telling them guys back and doing all of this kind of stuff. All to do with immigration. She's the one that will open up all the doors now. Everybody is looking at all of these. Because we are all people that they will all suffer through all of these, not just as guys here. Every place around the world. So, all I can say, everybody, say prayers. And God bless and keep everybody strong. The Hawaiian Kingdom is alive and is here to stay.
It's 8 o'clock now, but I will entertain questions as long as you have them. But we're just going to do a little bit of cleaning up. Thank you, Debbie Ward, for bringing all this beautiful foliage to help us lighten the mood a little bit. And also, I want to say thank you to our legislative aide that stuck with me, Nelson Ho.
I just wanted to ask a question of Dr. Sai. As you were indicating that we don't want the situation to explode, and you were suggesting that the governor, our governor, declare martial law. And when I hear martial law, I think about Marcos of the Philippines. And if we are under martial law, how do we move from that to whatever we really want to resolve the situation? I don't want to get stuck in martial law.
Me too. So the word martial actually means military, right? So when you do martial law, when you hear that word martial law, that applies within a country, like a civil war, and you declare martial law because you're dealing with an insurrection, right? Now, or an invasion by a foreign country. What basically martial law is it puts a stop to any legislation, and it puts control in the military governor to address or respond to the crisis. That's what it does. Otherwise, there's so many checks and balances. By the time you come up with a decision, You already got run over. So that's what martial law means. Now, the exact term martial law, which means military government, is actually applied in international affairs. So if it's the same concept, but instead of establishing a government during occupation, martial law, you would call it military government. So there's actually a court case on this. The US Supreme Court says, when you hear martial law, think internal. When you hear military government, think external. So for the United States, when it invaded Iraq and they overthrew the Iraqi government in 2003, they actually formed a military government. That's a form of martial law, but internationally, military government, and that was a coalition for provisional authority. And that's where Ambassador Bremer was administering Iraqi law. And through that process of administering Iraqi law, they then began the process of de-occupation, which ultimately led to al-Maliki, right, the prime minister at that time, to become the prime minister, and then a transfer of sovereign authority came through a treaty of peace, and then the occupation comes to an end. So that's the process. What we need today, which is why I spoke to Mike McCartney on this very serious matter, is that the state of Hawaii, although it thought it was an American government, it's not, but it is an armed force of the United States in a foreign state. They need to become a government. And in order to become a government, they have to declare martial law under their constitution, which international law sees as a military government. Actually gave Mike McCartney a report of what we covered for those 3 meetings. And I laid out everything. And that report is actually part of Jennifer's first letter that was sent to Kamehameha. So I would recommend that you folks go download the letter that Jennifer sent through her attorney to Mr. Kamehameha, and you will read that report and you can now see what it was, because these are moves to fix the problem. These are not moves to exacerbate the problem. What exacerbates the problem is when you have defiance to the rules. See, then it gets worse. And that's why the key here is education and awareness and knowledge. Don't pick a side yet, because you may regret picking one side. Remember, you hear that thing, that common anecdote, whatever you say can and will be used against you in a court of law? Take that to heart. Don't say too much, because that could be used against you later, even though you didn't think so. The first question that I would pose if I'm faced with this is, where do I learn more about this? Yeah? We need to begin to ask the right questions and not take positions, because you might regret taking a position. And Jennifer, she took those actions by asking the right questions. And that was what I can see informed her presentation, because I can tell you, this was all her. It was all her. And it was impressive, but it does show the cognitive aspect of comprehension. She actually understood what she was explaining, even though she may have had trouble with certain terms. But you notice she said, oh, I had to look it up. Perfect. Get a dictionary. Look it up. Don't ask people what they think. Look it up. Webster's Dictionary. She now loves Black's Law Dictionary. You know? So that's how we can fix the problem. These things are all in motion. Right now is the awareness that is happening. And this is really good. I mean, to me, I think this is phenomenal, because this is not an issue of Americans, Hawaiians. It's not a racial issue. It's not a cultural. This is, everybody is affected by this. And that's what's important. And that's what's in the Geneva Convention. Did I answer that question? So I too want to get beyond the military government, and let's start living life for what it really is.
Thank you, Dr. Slade.
Aloha, my name is Danny Lee, I live in KL. First of all, yeah, I really got to congratulate Jen for being so courageous. It takes a lot of courage. It's always, you know, if you're in other district, you should be pressuring your legislator to take a similar stand. I think that's important. In fact, this may be the beginning of a Me Too movement in terms of getting back everybody, pushing them so that they take the right step. So I congratulate everyone. Now, I myself is not Kanaka Maoli. I'm a settler. I've been here since 1971 when I came to University of Hawaii, Manoa. But I think education is important. I didn't know any of these stuff. I wasn't brought up in the education system here, but even kids that were brought up here didn't know any of that stuff. So we're all learning. So that's really critical. Now, the only thing though is that I'm not a legal expert. I know you're saying that the legal aspect is to go back to the law of occupation and form of military, asking to appoint a military government. But that's a slippery slope to me. That's my question. Because we know from history, the United States Army is an imperialist country. It has never followed any international law. So how can you trust them and how can you enforce it? To me, you can only have that if you have a mass movement that really push them. And in fact, in the future, in the not too distant future, probably have to make international alliances because other countries will have to put a brick on the United States taking, repressive action. So how do we do that? To me,
no, that's an excellent question because I always hear that. It's like when people hear military, panic button. Whoa, because what you see. Now, what's happening here is the military government hasn't even been formed. What you had is an armed force that has created this very problem that we're in. So this didn't happen through a military government. What we're looking at is a military government to fix the problem because that's how the rules work. Now, in order for a military government to actually work with regard to civilians, when I say education, what I'm saying is you folks need to know what your rights are to hold the entity accountable that is called the military government. No, and see, that's part of the process that we're going through, okay, that what Jennifer's going through. But you folks are just getting a nibble of what your rights are, because once you know what your rights are, then you also have to know how to enforce your rights. The Geneva Convention is from 1949. You have to understand, which Jennifer is understanding, how the international community works for the protection of civilians during occupations. There are mechanisms there that are very different than what you would be used to within a country itself. Like, normally you can call the police, hey, I'm being assaulted. Okay, how do you do that if you're an occupied state? Who do you call? Right? That's why there are mechanisms called the International Committee of the Red Cross, Amnesty International, Human Rights Council. But you have to speak the language that they can understand. Because if you say Hawaii is a part of the United States, then it undermines what you're trying to seek to remedy. So the key here is the military government is going to be formed because it has to. But it's going to be formed by people here in Hawaii. That's not the United States. That's called the state of Hawaii. That's my cousin who's a police officer. That's my son who's a cop in Honolulu. General Logan is a National Guardsman. He's not from, 25th Division. We're actually talking about our own people being a part of fixing the problem. This is not handing it off to Pu'akoloa and saying, hey, you guys run with it. This is actually the state of Hawaii. That's what I explained to Mike McCartney. So that military government is just the term that is used to apply to our situation. To put it bluntly, we've been playing football using baseball rules. We now are starting to understand football rules and we're going, oh, that's what that is. That's what Jennifer is doing. She's applying football rules to explain a football game. So we have to stop using baseball rules, like the state of Hawaii, like the Constitution, like the federal government. That's baseball rules. But it's a slow process. Now, we at the University of Hawaii, we teach this stuff. We have writing intensive courses, both graduate and undergrad. So I can assure you that this is not happening in a vacuum. People are being educated, the younger generation who don't have baggage, like all of us, growing up believing something that we now find out is not true. A lot of times what we're going through is just that paradigm shift, trying to say, no, this can't be, it can't be. Did you know at the University of Hawaii, it's really an accepted fact that Hawaii's occupied? No, that's how they talk. Hawaii's occupied. Yeah, I knew that. That was not spoken that way at the university level before the Permanent Court of Arbitration in the Netherlands. Prior to that, they were talking colonization, indigenous rights, nativeness. Now, laws of occupation, Hague and Geneva Conventions. Now you get somebody from the UN Human Rights Office now sending a communication to the judges saying that you have to comply with the Hague and Geneva Conventions. Well, he forgot to tell you what happens when you don't comply. Because when you don't comply, those are war crimes, and that's what Jennifer pointed out. So that's the reality that we're walking into. So the first thing here is, the military government will fix the problem, but I am not proposing that you form the military government way before people wake up to know what their rights are. Because then how do you hold anybody accountable? You want to make sure who's up there. You know you know that you know what the law is. See, that's how it's supposed to work, and not, okay, whatever you say, yes sir. So it's a process, yeah. But again, it's the process of knowing your rights first, as opposed to declaring we need a military government. Yeah. But we're going to need it to fix the problem, otherwise this whole place blows up.
We do have a handout on the rights as protected persons. But the main thing is understanding the Geneva Convention. And that is on my website as well. And we have a copy back there.
Aloha kako. My name is Kale Gumotak. We invited Jen to attend our conference over a year ago, as well as Mayor Harry Kim and all the other county council members. We invited them. And Jen was the only one that took us up on it, or I take that back. Harry showed up briefly, and Eileen O'Hara showed up briefly to the conference, but Jen was the only one that stayed at the entire conference. And I'd really like to thank her for taking the bull by the horn and sitting there and listening to all of the experts that we brought in. Dr. Sai, Donovan Preza, Dr. Willie Kawai, and all of the experts coming from the university. And so, Jen, I'd like to let people know that we have another conference scheduled. And for all of you here tonight, you all need to be there. And it's going to be during La Ku'oko'a. How many of you know what La Ku'oko'a is? Oh wait. That is the Hawaiian Kingdom Independence Day. November 28th. But our conference is going to be held in Kalapana, down at Uncle's, on the 24th. And we will be bringing in Dr. Sai, Dr. Niklaus Schweitzer, who's a professor at the University of Hawaii and former consul to the Swiss embassy, Swiss consulate. And we'll be bringing in Dr. Kamana Beamer, as well as others. So you need to be there so that the questions that you're asking tonight will be answered. A lot of the questions, but the continuation of the education is necessary. Because it's taken me several years to really get a grasp on this. And so Jen, can you give us what you thought of our conference?
Oh yeah, so I talked about that a little bit. It was very loaded. It was heavy. I was confused. Obviously this is very legally complex things, and it challenges the very foundation of everything that I believe to be true growing up, even growing up in Hawaii. So yeah, please come. And like Dr. Sai said, the only way we're going to do this and bring justice and truth is through knowing our rights and through being educated. So the conference, those annual conferences are doing that. I mean, that's what got me started on reading these papers and doing this research. Because it blew me away, and it's also fascinating. I mean, the Hawaiian Kingdom was very progressive for its time. Yeah, excuse me. It's a paradigm shift. I mean, this is all very new to me. I mean, I've only really come to terms with all of this and grown to really understand it enough to take action in the past few months.
Thank you.
So what I want to know is, are you going to challenge in some legal way or just as an official make a stink about the fact that they did not provide this meeting with law enforcement protection and whatever security? Because you know why they did that, because they're delegitimizing you. They're rejecting you as an official, which is fill in the blank.
That's called retaliation. I don't know how to challenge it, honestly. Fortunately, we didn't really need them, fortunately. But when I had talked to them, I called our CPO, our community police officer for Puna. He said that he would ask his captain. The next day I called back, he said his captain said no. I said, why? And he said, I don't know, he just said no. I was like, well, what can we do if somebody starts getting crazy and disruptive? And he said, well, you can call us. You know what happens when you call the police in Puna. Right.
They're right next door.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, were you in line? I wasn't sure. Okay, I'm sorry. Then we'll get to you next.
Linda Crow, president of Stop Bombing Hawaii, which I created out of frustration of the stonewalling. My question to you, Jen, is now your term's up in January, yes? December, okay. And then another council person will not be as good as you taking the place. But what is for you, I know you'll follow this through to where you have to, and it's going to go way beyond January, but what's for you after your council term?
We're going to be recovering from a minute. I don't really have anything to announce yet. Currently, no. I won't be running for office, if that's your question. Yeah. But I will be following this through. This is, I mean, we have to keep the momentum up, and there's no going back. I need to follow through with what I started.
My name is Ariel Murphy. I came from the Philippines. I don't know if everybody knows the Philippines was once a U.S. colony. And I know how it is when foreigners occupy your country and prevent you from speaking your language, prevent you from doing certain things. They take over education, they take over everything. At this point, I understand, and I support sovereignty. I understand that we are still educating and making people aware of what this is all about and what could happen, and that it need not necessarily be explosive. But what I want to know is, at this point, what can we do or what is being done? There's education. Our keikis are in the schools. What are they being taught regarding the Hawaiian Kingdom? I mean, who is or what is being done so that even at that level, at this time, we're doing something to make our keikis aware of what happened in the past, what we're doing now, and what could possibly happen in the future. That's my question. My other question is, okay, so we're fighting for sovereignty, and we don't want to commit war crimes. In the meantime, the people of Puna are like, okay, shops are closing, businesses are losing money. At the same time that we do what we're supposed to be rightfully and rightfully doing, what is pono, fighting for what is right and taking back what is ours. I consider myself Hawaiian, by the way, even if I'm not Kanaka Maoli. What can we do to help the people of Puna? I mean, in Pahoa, there's a shop that just closed, I think, the other day because there's not enough business. The economy there in Lower Puna, even maybe in Upper Puna, is dying. I hope we can do something in the same way that, it's not a one-track approach, I believe. While we're doing this thing, we can also do this thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, your first question on education. What is being taught in schools today? My niece, she brought home some homework while we were having dinner, and it's funny, how many of you know Tiffany Edwards Hunt? That's her teacher. And I was looking at her homework and it was talking about the history of Hawaii, and it said in 1959 the United States annexed Hawaii and Hawaii became a state of the United States. That's what we're teaching our kids right now. That's just my personal experience with my niece. But yes, it comes down to education. The second question is, yes, Puna is in bad shape right now. 90% of our businesses in Pahoa are on the verge of bankruptcy. If not, they're getting bankrupt now. I've been going, I did attend many Main Street meetings after the lava flow. 2 weeks ago, I met with the planning director and research and development to go over the ask that they're asking from the legislator. Many of you know or might know that I was pretty critical of how they were proposing to initially spend the funds that they were getting from the state and the federal government, because it didn't seem like they were going directly at Puna. A lot of the monies were going to, they wanted to do the Banyan Drive redevelopment agency, but luckily there was $2 million in there for parking in Pahoa, and that's something that I've been advocating with, and I actually negotiated with Parks and Recreation months and months ago for them to allow the people to use the parking lot at the park to be able to go to use the businesses in Pahoa, because parking is one of the main problems. I also advocated for them for Pahoa to get sidewalks. And what I was saying with the recovery monies was that instead of those monies going to the Banyan Drive redevelopment agency, those should be going to start implementing the Puna Community Development Plan, to start supporting the town halls, the town centers in each subdivision, so that each subdivision can have their own economic activity, and people won't have to keep driving to Hilo for everything. And that's within the Puna Community Development Plan that came straight from the community. And so anyway, so I met with the planning director and research and development, and now I'm working with them for a concerted, united voice, because the state legislator is treating Hawaii like a redheaded stepchild, basically. Hawaii got $100 million over their flooding. They're making us beg for $12 million. And 700 homes were lost in the lava flow. So that gives you some perspective. All right, no more questions. Oh, okay, I do have to use the bathroom.
Just one point. There were 4 police writing tickets down at the corner.
Thank you for announcing that. I'm sorry. I'm really disappointed to hear that. Just so you guys didn't hear that the police were writing tickets for people coming to attend a public town hall to hear their representatives speak for license plates in the Hawaiian Kingdom. Go ahead.
Aloha everyone, I'm Gene Tamashiro. I am a sovereign Hawaiian national, and we're so grateful that people with experience and background and knowledge about how to remedy what we are facing on an international level in the world of commerce or corporate law, and also, fortunately for us, in the world of Keakua's natural law justice that has been codified into our Hawaiian Kingdom Declaration of Rights 1839. So you already hold the key to your remedy because you have unalienable rights that Keakua has bestowed upon you. And so what are rights? Rights are actually any activity that you choose to do and it does not cause harm to other sentient beings. Yeah, follow your bliss and do no harm. Now there's layers of international law and corporate law. We have to make a very clear distinction. What law are we talking about when we're engaging anybody? Are we talking about corporate law, Roman, civil, corporate, maritime law? Or are we talking about Keakua's law? The law that basically says you can follow your bliss but do no harm. The law of lawful adjudication that requires that we examine what is the truth, was any harm done, and what is the status of agreements. You already hold your key, okay? So I think it's important, along with what Dr. Sai is saying that we need to address on the international level, that because you have an unalienable right to be lawful in your country right now, to organize yourself and assert yourself in correspondence with good people working on the international level. So for anybody that has a Hawaiian Kingdom plate and that you got a ticket, there are those of us, including myself, and the judges know, we will stand up for you because you're lawful in your own country. We have to do presentments before you go. Who in here got a ticket that has Hawaiian Kingdom plates? Because that's what I heard something happen. Okay, well, if you know who they are, or if you turn out to be one of them, we can deal with that, okay? So I was going to ask Jen, is she back yet? Aloha. Hi, Uncle Moses. Thank you, God bless.
Love you guys.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Jen one question, and if she says she's an American, is she an American state national sovereign under Keakua's law? Or is she a 14th Amendment U.S. citizen who's actually property of the federal corporation? So you have to really think about your status, who you are, where you are, and what law you live by. So I wanted to know what kind of American she is. Yeah, thank you. I don't know where she is. So does anyone... Okay. Does anyone have questions about asserting your unalienable right to be lawful in your own country? You know, you can do that. We have to do that together. It's possible to do it alone, but it's much better to do it together. Okay. All right, well, everyone's leaving. It's time to go.